Before dinosaurs walked on land, before forests, cities, or even humanity existed, the true rulers of Earth did not live on land. They ruled the oceans, and those seas were more terrifying than any nightmare you can imagine. Today's oceans appear blue and calm, but in prehistoric times there was no such thing as safety at sea. Every layer of water was a hunting ground. Above you, below you, and within the darkness beside you, something was always waiting for a mistake. 500 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, the oceans suddenly came alive. But this was not a gentle world. Anomalocaris, one of the earliest apex predators. Its compound eyes detected the slightest movement. Its grasping limbs crushed prey in an instant. In a time before fish or whales, it was the ocean's nightmare. As time moved forward, the arms race escalated. Fish appeared, but they were anything but fragile. Placoderms, armored from head to tail. Their mouths were not for chewing, but for slicing prey apart. The most terrifying of them all, Dunkleosteus. It didn't need teeth, its entire skull was a weapon. When life moved onto land, the oceans did not become kinder. They became more brutal. Marine reptiles emerged. Plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, mosasaurs, reaching over 15 meters in length. Their jaws opened at impossible angles. They swallowed sharks, tore apart rivals, and attacked anything that entered their realm. In their world, there was no middle of the food chain, only survive or be eaten. Yet the most terrifying thing about prehistoric oceans was not the monsters. It was what you couldn't see. Oxygen-depleted depths, toxic algal blooms, poisoned layers of water. At times, entire oceans turned into death traps, not because of predators, but because the ocean itself became lethal. If you stood on a prehistoric shore and gazed into the sea, you wouldn't see a view. You would see a world that devours everything. The prehistoric ocean was not made for life. Life only survived there, briefly. When sunlight vanished, true fear began. The prehistoric deep sea was not empty darkness. There were eyes, adapted to eternal night. Bioluminescent organs were not for beauty, but for deception, attraction, and death. By the time you realized it wasn't starlight, the distance was already zero. In prehistoric oceans, size did not guarantee safety. You might be larger than your prey, but someone was always larger than you. Faster swimmers, stronger jaws, patience that lasted for days. Even apex predators eventually became targets for something else. The terror of prehistoric oceans came from one thing: there were no rules. Every evolutionary change was about not being eaten. Armor thickened, jaws strengthened, senses sharpened. The failed versions left no fossil record. They simply vanished. In Earth's history, the greatest terror often came before silence. Volcanic eruptions, oxygen-starved waters, runaway temperatures. Entire oceans lost their color, sound, and life, not because of a monster, but because the entire system collapsed. The marine life you see today exists not because it was the strongest, but because it survived. Every fish, every whale, every breath beneath the waves is built upon the silence of countless failures. If you fell into a prehistoric ocean, you wouldn't even have time to scream. Pressure, cold, loss of direction. Fear wouldn't arrive slowly, it would instantly consume every sense you have. This was not an adventure. This was elimination. The prehistoric ocean remembered no heroes, no kings, only those who adapted and those who disappeared. And humanity is simply the latest visitor. In prehistoric times, the ocean was not a stage for life. It was not a background, not a container for stories. It was the story itself. A shift in temperature, a change in salinity, a slight redirection of currents could decide the fate of entire generations. You might think strength ensured survival, but in prehistoric oceans, speed was the real currency. Detect danger sooner, turn faster, react a fraction earlier in the dark. Those who slowed down were caught by history itself. Prehistoric oceans were never silent. Sound traveled farther underwater. Impacts, low-frequency vibrations, the grinding of bone and shell. Sounds you couldn't hear were heard by something else. And that was the signal for them to move closer. Humans rely on sight, but prehistoric ocean predators did not need to see you. They sensed pressure changes, distortions in water flow, the faint vibrations caused by muscle movement. Before you turned around, you were already targeted. Land has boundaries the ocean does not. There is no corner to hide in, no high ground to claim. Above, below, ahead, behind, every direction is an entry point. In prehistoric oceans, position itself was a risk. Life in prehistoric oceans was not shaped by hope. It was carved by fear. Every escape left a mark. More streamlined bodies, faster neural responses, more cautious behavior. Fear became the language of evolution. You might think winning the hunt meant it was over, but in prehistoric oceans, feeding itself was a risk. Blood spread, vibrations leaked. Other predators were already on their way. Victory was only the beginning of the next danger. The deeper you went, the closer death became. Pressure crushed cavities. Cold slowed reactions. Oxygen faded. Not all creatures could return to shallower waters. Some, once they descended, never came back. The prehistoric ocean was not evil. It simply did not care. It did not reward bravery. It did not punish cruelty. It responded only to adaptation and mistakes. Humans try to understand the world. We name creatures, we classify them, we label predators and prey. But the prehistoric ocean did not need to be understood. It had already been operating for hundreds of millions of years before understanding ever existed. In prehistoric oceans, there were no protagonists, no heroic species, no life destined to rule. Those at the top today could vanish tomorrow. Dominance was only a temporary misunderstanding. The giants you see were only a few. What truly reshaped the ocean was numbers, microbes carpeting the seafloor, exploding blooms of plankton, invisible waves of life. They needed no teeth to rewrite the world. Sometimes the ocean was not a hunting ground, it became a weapon. Rising temperatures, chemical imbalance, accumulating toxins. No chase, no escape. Life simply vanished layer by layer. On the scale of prehistoric oceans, death was never in a hurry. It could wait. A generation, 1,000,000 years, until conditions slowly became unlivable for everything. Time was the quietest predator of all. Survival did not mean you did something right. It only meant you had not been eliminated yet. In prehistoric oceans, there were no success stories, only temporary traces. The prehistoric ocean remembered no names, no shapes, no glory. It preserved only what could be buried, what could fossilize. Everything else didn't even count as failure. The true terror of prehistoric oceans was not their cruelty. It was that they did not care if you were ready. They did not wait, they simply continued. Perhaps we fear prehistoric oceans not because of the creatures, but because we cannot find our place there. Today's ocean is still blue, but that blue is only the surface. Beneath it remains a world that exists for no species at all. The prehistoric ocean was never meant to be seen. There were no witnesses, no recorders, no reason to be understood. It happened, and that was enough. We imagine terror must have a shape, fangs, massive jaws, a colossal silhouette. But in prehistoric oceans, true fear often had no form. It was simply the moment the environment stopped supporting your existence. Not all death arrived violently. Some came slowly. Food dwindled. Reproduction failed. Young could not grow. There was no drama, just one generation, then another, quietly fading away. You might think going deeper meant safety, but the prehistoric deep sea was only a different risk. No room to flee, no spare energy, no margin for error. Depth was not protection, only delay. Not all life could adapt forever. Bodies have limits. Metabolism has limits. Evolution has limits too. When change crossed that line, even the most perfected organisms were left behind. Fossils are the lucky few. Most life left no evidence of its failure. The foundation of prehistoric oceans is not bones, but silence. If time flowed backward and you stood by that shore, you would not know what was about to happen. Because to the ocean, your arrival and your disappearance were the same. Even today, we still underestimate the ocean, not because we lack knowledge, but because we are not used to a world that does not center around us. The prehistoric ocean is gone, but its logic never disappeared. Adaptation, elimination, continuation. Only the characters have changed. Between you and the prehistoric ocean, there is only a thin layer of time. It is not protection. It is simply not yet tested. The prehistoric ocean remembered nothing and forgot nothing. What happened was never preserved as a story, only absorbed into the background. Death left no trace. It simply became part of the next cycle. The terror of prehistoric oceans did not require your presence. Even without witnesses, even without awareness, it still existed. Fear was not a feeling. It was a condition. In certain eras, existence itself became a burden. Insufficient energy, deteriorating conditions, relentless pressure. Not being eaten, but simply no longer holding on. In prehistoric oceans, there was no why it died, no why it survived. Things happened because conditions allowed them to. Causality was calm and simple. From the ocean's perspective, life was not a miracle. It was temporary noise, appearing, increasing, then becoming quiet again. Silence was the default state. At a certain point, change began to slow, not because of balance, but because nothing could respond anymore. That was not peace. It was exhaustion. The most terrifying aspect of prehistoric oceans was that you could not stand outside them. You were not an observer. You were not a narrator. The moment you existed, you were already inside the system. Evolution had no reverse. Once the ocean took a path, all life either followed or was left behind. There was no restart, no correction. The prehistoric ocean proved one thing: forms were temporary. Advantages were temporary. Existence itself was temporary. The only constant was change. The prehistoric ocean is gone, but its logic still exists beneath today's waves. It did not disappear. It merely became familiar.